You built the SOP, you hired the person, you handed over the work, and 3 weeks later, you're doing it yourself again. That's not a people problem, that's a systems issue. And most solopreneurs never figure out the difference. They simply argue, it's faster if I just do it myself. I know because I'm speaking from years of personal experience here. Let's talk about why delegation fails and how to fix it. If you've been following this series so far, you know where we are. Week 1 was about the 6 steps you need to build a business that runs without you. Week 2 was about SOPs, how to extract your process and document it in such a way that someone else can execute it without you being there. Now, week 3 is where the system comes to life really. And it's where most solopreneurs completely collapse. Because after week 1 and 2, you've done the hard work. You've mapped out the load, extracted the code, standardized the output. You have the SOP, you have the hire, and then you hand it over. But that's when something breaks. Here's what's actually happening. You delegated a task, but you never established the system properly. There's 2 ways this usually goes. One is, here's the work, figure out how to do it. And then there is, here's the task, here's the standard, and here's how we audit the outcome. The first way creates chaos because people get handed a half-baked process that only the expert who created it understands, and they have to figure out what's actually happening. The second way builds a business that runs without you, clear, precise, and with measurable outcomes. Most solopreneurs are opting for that first path and they wonder why they end up doing the work themselves. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's diagnose the failure before we look at the fix. There are 3 failure modes actually. Every solopreneur hits at least one of them. Failure mode 1 we can call blank canvas delegation. Here's the task, you're smart, figure it out by yourself. There's no SOP, no output standard, no checkpoints. If you're doing that, you're not delegating, you're abdicating, which is a fancy way of saying you push away the work without caring much. The output will be super unpredictable in this case because no standard was defined in the first place. Failure mode 2 is the micromanagement loop. You delegate it, but you don't let go. You check in constantly, override decisions in the middle of the process, and ultimately pay someone to do the work while you end up doing it yourself. So this isn't really a trust problem, it's a monitoring issue. In this case, you haven't defined what done correctly looks like, so you substitute micromanagement for clarity. And failure mode 3 is the most dangerous one of them all, the reclaim, because it feels like the right decision in the moment. Work comes back wrong. You take it back and tell yourself it's faster if you do it yourself. You're probably right, at least in the short term. But every time you reclaim a task, you're programming into your business one thing. This task requires the founder. And every time that task is up, guess who'll be doing the work? It's you, of course. So if that's not the way to go, what does a working system for delegating look like? Well, we have 3 phases. Phase 1 is to assign the function, not the task. And there's a difference between write my emails and own the email communication function. When you assign the function, the other person doing the work gets an SOP, the output standard, the tools and the logins. What they don't get is your personal preference for how to do it. Just because you like to send emails at 5 a.m. doesn't mean your hire has to do the same. Your SOP defines what the output looks like, not the method. Let the person find the method. That's how you get scalability. Now, phase 2 is the ramp protocol. This is the phase most solopreneurs skip entirely. For the first 2 weeks after delegating, you have to disappear completely. The other person executes by themselves. You review the output, and if you need to correct, you correct against the SOP, not against personal preference. If output misses the standard, you don't criticize the person. You simply update the SOP, the documentation. Wrong output means your extraction of information in week 2 was incomplete. Part of the process is still living in your head somewhere, so you need to pull it out, document it, and update the standard. Because the ramp protocol is for calibration, not people evaluation. Refine the SOP and the process first. Phase 3 is the first solo run. Eventually, you need to let go. Someone else needs to fully execute without oversight. This is the phase most solopreneurs never reach. They get stuck in phase 2 indefinitely, where they hand off the work and disappear, and that's it. Once you get the 3 phases right, it's time to stop doing the work entirely. Someone else should now be able to do it without you. That's one step in the direction of becoming owner of your business rather than being the operator in your business. But you can't just go with a hands-off approach. There's still the need to monitor the output of whatever you delegated in the first place. And you should do that in 2 ways. First one is a weekly output analysis. The goal is to double check if the real-life output your hire produced is matching the checklist in the SOP. If the answer is yes, the output matches the checklist, then no action is required, at least not on your part. But if the output doesn't match the checklist, either the SOP needs to be updated or the person handling it needs more training. In addition to the weekly checks, there should also be a monthly review. That's to double check if, let's say, there are inefficiencies in the process itself. Did your hire spot some friction or bottlenecks you didn't see so far? Generally speaking, any kind of monitoring isn't about catching mistakes. It's about maintaining and improving system integrity. Because the better the system works, the more you can remove yourself from it entirely. That being said, here's where this series connects. When your franchise OS is running correctly, your role changes completely. You stop being in the business, you run the system that runs the business, so that you gain time for the deep work clusters and the high leverage decisions, which allow you to scale the business eventually. That's what we're looking into next week, scaling the system. If you haven't gone through week 1 and week 2 of this series, well, I suggest you start there or check the links in the description. I definitely see you next week.